Yeah, we're gonna start the webinar presentation info session now. First of all, thank you all for coming. I know busy days, busy times right now. It's kind of hard to carve out hours for stuff like this, but I appreciate you being here. Hopefully we can kind of use what we learned today and answer your questions today so we can kind of pass this on to the folks who may not have been able to be here. We're obviously talking about the Collegiate Recovery Census Project, which we're going to explain what it is and say more about it. Before we do that, we should probably introduce ourselves. So my name is Dylan. Some of you may have seen me on webinars before or know me through the SAFE project, but I am the technical assistance manager here at SAFE on our SAFE campuses team, meaning I help you all do your jobs the best I can and help you all support your students, and we help support students in recovery and those who've been impacted by addiction. That's what we're here to do today. So Alex, go ahead.
Sure. So don't let the hair fool you. That's me, Alex Rahorchuk. I'm with SR4 DIS, and what we do is we're really trying to bring data science into recovery support, into that space. I think with this project, we've been fortunate to partner with SAFE and try to get information specifically about collegiate recovery support, and be able to gather info and kind of get it to where it's accessible and useful to the people who need it. So that's where I'm coming from.
Cool. Yeah, glad you're here. We're glad we can chat today. We've been chatting about this in like little meetings for a calendar year now, so it's good to be able to chat in webinar form and introduce you to everybody. So a bit of an overview, just kind of what we're talking about today. I'm going to give like a crude history lesson of how we got to the census project with kind of some moving parts that happened to kind of land at the right place for us to be able to do this. Talk about what the census project even is. So I'll give the overview of what it is. Talk about the survey for those of you who have not taken the census survey. I know some of you, I see April in the chat, or April on the attendees list, who's actually a tester for the survey. Some of you have seen your responses. So maybe you'll learn something new about the census you didn't, or the survey you didn't know when you were taking it. But after that, we're going to talk about the dashboard itself. So the platform that helps you work with the data that we gather through the census. We're going to talk about kind of the collaborations and the fuel of the census project. And then we'll do some Q&A at the end, which again, we can stop and have discussions as we go, as it's helpful. So please put questions in the chat, push us, ask us, give us your ideas. Tell us we're doing things wrong if you need to, but feel free to please engage in the chat as we go. All right, I'm going to do my worst impression of a high school history teacher here. I'm just going to give you a brief-ish overview of how we got here and why we landed on doing this project the way that it is now. So first, kind of introduce the organization Transforming Youth Recovery, which is a nonprofit organization that started in 2011, 2012, when Stacey Matheson was looking to kind of change the world for people like her son, who was at that time struggling with addiction and mental health and recovery. And so she started Transforming Youth Recovery for that purpose. And in 2013, around the time that her son actually passed away, they published a report with SR4, so the folks that Alex is with, that were overviewing the 38 aspects that they saw were deeply important as universities were building collegiate recovery capacity. So what was kind of the soil that needed to be at a university for a CRC to grow out of it? That report was hugely transformative, hugely informative to the field and the really young field it was at that time. I think some of you in chat may know the number better than I do, but I think in 2013, there were less than 30 collegiate recovery programs in the country, or universities that recognize themselves as having collegiate recovery of any sort. And so then if we fast forward the next 4 years, as TYR and SR4 were working together, we saw this like 500% expansion of collegiate recovery programs and communities around the country. That happened as ARHE was getting its wheels turning, as other folks around the country were having an impact, but especially as TYR was giving universities this information, working with SR4 to build this information, but also TYR had started their granting process, which of course started with University of Nevada, Reno, and then they started continuing to give universities $10,000 seed grants to start collegiate recovery initiatives on their campus. And so again, that's a huge deal for students like me at the time who were trying to start collegiate recovery programs at universities who wouldn't give us any money or any resources to do anything. And so I was at a school where we received a TYR grant, and then as were about 100 other schools. And then 2017, TYR and SR4 again partnered to publish a lot of the data they had gathered. And so this was in 2017, a report called the Census and Definitions for Recovery Support in Higher Ed. And so it was a census, right? It was kind of using the question of what exists and what do we have out there to then come together to create definitions of what even is a collegiate recovery program. We keep hearing about treatment and recovery programs being close together, but how common is that? Kind of asking a lot of the questions and answering a lot of those questions that we kind of had that answering through storytelling and through just kind of sharing in our networks. And so it helped us right size a lot of the conversations that we were having with the data, which at the time was only 118 universities who had been impacted by ARHE, Transforming Youth Recovery, or had been guided by the data that SR4 had helped them build. So again, 2013, not very much collegiate recovery. We're getting there, we're building, we're spinning our wheels. 2017, at that point, TYR had really put some stilt under this work with data alongside SR4. And then between 2017 and 2019, a lot of those initial grants started expiring, and we started seeing some of those universities really take off, some of them kind of stagnate. And then in between 2017 and 2019, SAFE Project started. It's a very similar story as TYR. Our founders at SAFE Project lost their son to an overdose. Their response to that was no one should have to experience this ever again. No parents, no families, no universities. And then part of SAFE Project's mission as it was founded became to support universities and becoming more recovery supportive. With the alignment in our missions and resources and things like that, in 2019, late in that year, Transforming Youth Recovery actually transferred all of their higher education resources to SAFE Project, to the Safe Campuses team, which is massive. And around that same time, we saw a lot of the Transforming Youth Recovery grants continue to end in kind of the later stage programs. I think some are currently using up the rest of their funds even into this year, but that was kind of, for a lot of intents and purposes, the end of the granting program. 2 months later after that transfer, COVID hit. And so a lot of things were coming together to show us that we needed to know what was happening now in collegiate recovery. We needed to have very consistent, deep, involved data mapping, data engagement, data gathering about what was going on with this field, because the most recent data we had that was so broad and so informative was 2017, with, of course, a lot of people continuing to do student-focused research, effectiveness-focused research, but there's really not been another effort that is so focused on just the what, the censusing, the general snapshot of the whole field of collegiate recovery, even outside of just collegiate recovery programs. So 2020, SAFE Project, SR4, we knew at SAFE Project we had something magical on our hands with them handing us the census and all the data and all of the work with it. We wanted to do something with it. So we spoke with the wonderful folks at SR4, of course, Alex and Chris and others, to talk about what do we do? How do we make this continue, and how do we make this better than it was, knowing that it was already so impactful? And so we'll talk about what we kind of came up with during those conversations, but then through the rest of last year and continuing today, we've been building and envisioning this census project. And then late in December of this past year, we launched the survey. Some of you helped us test it. Some of you have taken it already. If you've taken that survey and the 2017 survey, you'll see quite a bit of overlap, but also some updated language, some new questions, and also some broader questions that we ask. We'll get into that later as well. And then next week, we'll talk about this as well. We're going to be launching the heart and soul of this, where it becomes alive, which is the dashboard. And of course, Alex is going to give us a phenomenal overview of that. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later. So yeah, that was my rambly impression of a high school teacher, high school history teacher. If you have any questions about any of this, or you have any gaps to fill, which I'm sure there are plenty, feel free to put them in chat and we can continue to expand. So with all that in mind, everything that's happened over the past nearly decade now, we decided to do the census project, which has really 3 parts to it, is how it works. So the first part being the survey itself. That's the input. How are we getting data into this body of knowledge? How are we kind of feeding it? The second part is the dashboard, which again is the living, breathing data itself, where we allow you to dig in, to interact, to learn not just what we tell you through the dashboard, but what you see through the dashboard, what you can mess around with, the way you can manipulate data in a positive way, not a manipulating way, but in a good way. How can you kind of look through the data and dig through it, however it best serves you? So again, it is in your hands and you can do what you need with it. And the third part keeps the thing going, which is referring to colleagues, collaborating through the data, and just again, making this useful. It's only useful as much as we use it, rather than just gathering and letting it kind of sit in a corner somewhere. So, all right. For me, this slide, I just want to go over it quickly, is, for me, it's the heart and soul of this, of the project itself. These are the guiding questions that brought the Census Project together. A lot of what the TYR report in 2017 gave us was, it broadened the conversation from what are the big CRPs doing, what are the big collegiate recovery programs and communities doing, why are they successful, to just what are we all doing? Like, what in the world is going on here? And answering that question with some robust data based on the people we can get to respond. And then that data, again, has been a snapshot that we still use today. We did our summer series webinars last summer, and we were still using the 2017 census data. So we then decided to take a little bit of a spin of it and guide the whole census project with the broad question of what does recovery support look like on your campus? So it's a what question, it's a broad question. Recovery support can be the Narcan training, the collegiate recovery program, it can be recovery ally training, it can be the food pantry on your campus. Like, what is on your campus that makes students have a better quality of life and help support and bolster the ability of students to recover effectively and recover consistently, outside of just some of the kind of building blocks we've gotten used to talking about. Let's broaden the question a little bit, right? And so once we have reported what that means, what that is on our campus, we can then use this body of data to ask the question, what can recovery support look like on our campuses? So we can get creative and we can get kind of imaginative of, oh, I'm at Ohio State and we have all of these things, but I'm looking up a couple of miles into Michigan. University of Michigan has some similar stuff, but we have some differences. Why is that? We can even connect with them to talk about that, or we can compare with all the Big Ten schools and see who's doing what. Just because we all know that that's what data can do for universities, is they can open up possibilities both for funding, for advocacy, for all sorts of things. But data can help us then appreciate what exists outside of our scope of work at our university, and then give us ideas to then implement on our university. Maybe a year later, we update our census results. We then look back at the data. Oh, it's changed a little bit. We haven't thought of that before, but we see it in the data. Maybe you implement it. We get this cycle and this momentum going of innovating in this field using data and connections and collaborations. So that's like my pie in the sky dream for all of this, is we get that momentum going where we're focusing on more inclusive, more accessible, and more creative, university accessible data or programs and approaches to supporting students in recovery. So that's my soapbox that I'll probably get on and off throughout this whole presentation. So, all right, quickly, goals of the census, if I haven't made it clear already. The first one, and I use this phrase, we've used this phrase a million times in meetings, Alex and I, is democratizing data, meaning that we don't want to have this be, give us your data so we can control it, but more of, let's hold a container, let's build an infrastructure so that we all can access data openly, equitably, and feed each other with data, right? Knowing that data is power when it comes to advocacy at universities. If you can go to a board meeting with a printout of the most recent data about collegiate recovery, that's a lot of power that you may not have had if we didn't have this available to you, where you were kind of either pulling 2017 data or just telling the stories of, oh, last time I heard, this may be the case. And so we know that data can be power for a lot of us in these positions. And so we wanted to make sure that was in all of our hands. The second point, which I talked about already, is broadening the conversation of, we know that not every university can have a full-fledged, fully funded, donor-ready collegiate recovery program. And so if we know that every university is different, let's gather data with that in mind. Let's ask the questions of what all is out there and how are we serving these students, because we know collegiate recovery students in recovery are at every campus, and students in recovery aren't dropping out not every student in recovery drops out or fails. A lot of them succeed, and many of them succeed even without collegiate recovery programs. What are they using? What services are they benefiting from? How is higher education in some ways, obviously not always, how in some ways is a university a positive place for student recovery, and how can we leverage those things on top of collegiate recovery programs and ally trainings and Narcan availability? How can we leverage all of this to make a more recovery supportive campus rather than just a recovery support program? Third one is just, again, using data to fuel curiosity and creativity. We want data to offer possibility rather than data to offer necessarily the answers, because we're not asking about effectiveness, or we're not asking about effectiveness, kind of point blank, we're asking about what exists, so that when we as a field can come together to discuss effectiveness with curiosity and creativity in mind. Because there are plenty of studies already out there that are talking about effectiveness, and maybe we can even use this data to inform those in terms of even broadening their questions, again, to make sure we're serving all of our students who are impacted by addiction. Final goal, which I'm sure there are more than this, these are the main ones, is having this really cool balance between, we can do the 2017 data overview and the kind of the data snapshot. We could do that again in 2021 maybe, right? If we get enough responses, we can say, hey, look, this is where the field's at right now. And that is a hugely important, really useful, kind of published, citable resource that says, hey, look, this is where we're at. But also, again, say Teresa from Washington is going to a board meeting and wants to go to say, look, I pulled this data as recently as 3 minutes before this presentation started. This is what we got. This is what we're comparing ourselves against. This is what we can learn from other universities. And that there's power in that, and having confidence of data of this is so recent that we can give you the exact time that it was last updated. And so there's a lot of the goals there, they all feed into each other, but again, it's the dreams that we all have to feed together to make this work. Did I miss anything yet, Alex? Okay. Again, please feel free to put questions in the chat. Because at this point, I'm going to quickly go over what the survey is, what it does, and kind of nitty-gritty of it. So again, the first part of the census project is the survey itself. It is where we ask you the questions, where we ask you to kind of upfront give us, or give each other really, kind of to buy in with your own data, the data of your university. We're asking questions like, again, really, what do you offer? What exists on your campus? What do students benefit from? That's pretty much all the questions, like the questions like that. But we, of course, we break them down into what does your counseling center offer? What kind of recovery does it support? What kind of services does this office give to your students? What partners do you have on campus? What are some of the meetings or the resources you refer students to? But at the end of the day, it's helpful for you to be a person on your campus who has a wide net knowledge of what exists. So folks like case managers who are navigating the university systems every day, or if you're a director of a collegiate recovery program and you've gotten some good institutional knowledge and been there for a while, just some advice is it's helpful to be someone or to have someone there with you or on a call with you as you go through the survey who can help make sure you can answer the questions. Because it says time to complete on here, 25 to 40 minutes. I would say 25 minutes is usually the universities that don't have a lot to answer with right now, or they don't have a lot of kind of nuance to their recovery programs and services, and they're kind of looking to just get started. And that data is incredibly valuable to us. But of course, that means the survey is going to be shorter for you, because you may answer no to the do you have a collegiate recovery program question, and that means you get to skip 15 questions. And so you get to kind of take some shortcuts if you don't have as much on your campus, but you still get full access to the dashboard. And the 40 minutes on the other end are folks who have more nuanced, well-rounded, holistic programming, and are well aware of what happens on their campus. Unfortunately, if you were like trying to force yourself to take the survey and you're not someone, maybe you're brand new to your campus, it could take you longer than 40 minutes. So we highly encourage you to partner with or have someone on your campus who is well informed on the resources that exist, including the recovery resources, whether or not they see them that way, to help you take the survey. We only need one response per school, so you don't need the director of every program on your campus to take it. It's better to get that information together first and then submit it as one response on behalf of your university. But at the same time, it's okay to skip questions. If you don't know the answer, rather than either just make it up or research for 30 minutes and maybe not be able to finish the survey that day if you're just totally lost, just skip the questions. You can always come back later and edit your responses in the future. I get the question a lot is when is the deadline? The weirdness of that is because the dashboard is a living thing that is fed by the survey that is ongoing. There technically is no deadline, but I understand that when your calendar is really full and you got a lot of stuff going on due to COVID, you might not have a lot of free time. Hearing that there is no deadline just means you might never get to it. So I encourage you, what we would say is sooner rather than later is the better way to think of a deadline, just because the more responses and data we have from the survey into the dashboard, the more effective this tool is for all of us. So the more data we can get, the sooner, the more effective each of these steps can be, and the more we can do with it. I'm going to have Alex, like when we talk about the dashboard, talk about how privacy works and how you can manage what is shown and what isn't, and kind of what the questions look like when we ask you about what you want to show to people. And so we'll get to that point, but the reality is we're not gathering personal information. We're not gathering personal identifiable information or personal information, really. And we're not asking student specific information. And so we're really just asking you to report the things that you could find on your university's website that help us kind of get them in a easy, reportable, and connected way. So that's that. And then the final point about the survey is that we deeply appreciate your feedback on the survey. If there's a question you wish was there that isn't, as wording in our field continues to always change, we of course are doing our best to always use the least stigmatizing language we can, and also include new options for questions as new practices emerge. We did our best. We had our testers kind of do their best as well to test of what, if we were missing anything, if there was language that needed to be changed. If you notice things like that, please let us know. The cool thing about the survey and the dashboard is that we can add like pulse questions for the survey of, hey, okay, you all taken the survey, but do you have this on your campus? We've heard a lot about this past month through talking to professionals. It's kind of a new thing. Do you have it? Do you know what it is? We can kind of ask you those questions to help all of us maintain momentum and speed when it comes to new practices, rather than the usual 5 years of arguing about it, a year of implementation, another 3 years of not being sure, another year of implementation, and then we kind of spin our wheels a little bit. Where hopefully we can use data as we go for that kind of stuff due to the responsiveness of the survey. Wow. Any questions about the survey so far? Feel free to put them in chat. Alex, any thoughts on the survey itself, this one?
Maybe this is the time to cover it, but sort of the two pathways for taking the survey. One of them is go to safeproject.us/census. You can take it right off their website. The other way would be getting an email invitation to take the survey. And the benefit of the email is that that would be a dedicated URL just for you. So you would be able to, you know, save your responses. You don't have to submit it until it's completely finished. In that sense, it's a little more convenient. You don't have to do it all in one sitting like you would from the website. The only issue with that is if we don't have your email, we can't send you an email invitation. So we're trying to work out how to get, you know, this in your inbox as well as just having it available on the Safe Project website.
Yeah, we'll do it as we're closing. We'll do a quick reminder of that, and you'll have the Safe Project email, the Safe Campuses email, so that you can request the invitation if you haven't already gotten one. Most of you, if you're already on the Safe Campuses listserv, you've already gotten an email with an invitation to the survey, which is why some of you have already taken it. But if you haven't gotten that email before, we would love to get you one. And again, we'll talk about that in a little bit here. And then Teresa, we're going to answer your question right about now. We're going to get into the dashboard, which is, oh, look at that, that's the slide, the dashboard. So Alex will be able to answer your question about kind of categorizing data by university type. So.
Okay, so before I guess share the screen and kind of show you what this kind of demo that we've built today, what we want this to be is a place for you to go get information at a bare minimum, so you can see how, you know, people are in aggregate responding to this survey. But then also, I mean, one thing that is kind of a huge benefit of this is when you're online working with this stuff, you don't need to know data science or any of this software to be able to, use pretty powerful tools like grouping and filtering the data where, somebody might be coming from a 2-year university and see, well, here's the landscape, here's how everybody's, responding, but, assume maybe, well, these are mostly 4-year universities and this isn't really a great way for me to benchmark or measure against, what our school's needs are. Well, with the dashboard, we're trying to build in those kind of those filters and those things for you. But I guess, why don't I just kind of get into it, and then we can sort of look at some of the features that that it has to offer. So, okay, Dylan, I'm sharing now, I think. Okay, so this is what the dashboard is going to look like. It's going to be accessible just as a web URL. You go into it. Some of the features are going to be here on top, like Dylan was saying, pulse surveys. If we get a lot of feedback, we wrote a pretty long survey and with a lot of questions covering a lot of ground, but we do get feedback and new things come up, and this is a constantly evolving field. So if there's questions, I just put an example, asking about like providing assistance for basic needs. So we have kind of a Likert style little survey here, the level of importance for students at your institution, and you can go down and answer each one of these, hit submit. And the idea is that, you would get right away a snapshot of, here's how, people have kind of responded to this little like snap survey. So you could get some information that way. And, that could be updated from time to time. I think there was a question about, are you classifying between different types of universities? So the answer is yes. We've actually merged the survey responses already with the Carnegie classifications. So, this is how people are responding so far. You've got your basic classifications, undergraduate profiles. So these are pretty specific. I'd certainly like to hear feedback of, are these too specific? And do we want, 3 categories instead of 9 or whatever? But then the size and setting. So the idea then is that, not just to tell you, well, what kind of schools have responded so far, but when you get into some of the, other results that you care about, to be able to use this as a filter of, well, how are 2-year schools responding? How are, primarily non-residential schools, what are they doing compared to residential schools, et cetera?
Alex, something, because I've gotten a question a couple of times from folks, not in this webinar, but outside of it, of, well, you didn't ask me anything in the survey about my university in terms of like demographics or the type of university it is. So can you explain how that data gets put into here, this kind of data?
Yeah, so I think we take it from college scorecard. So I'll put it in the, I think I put it here in about, but yeah, so the US Department of Education has a whole lot of data on your university, and it's, categorizing it on a whole lot of different things. And what we do is based on your response of what institution you're at, we go and get your OPE ID and then merge it on that ID so that we have that information and we don't have to ask you about it. We can just go and get it.
Saves you about 30 questions. So.
But so let's see, then, here's where, we've got our data and we're putting it into different categories. As far as, so you'll have the option, you'll have the option of when you take the survey, either you want your information, either it's all publicly available, your responses, you have that choice. You have the choice of, I'd like my responses to be included in the aggregate reporting. So, you might be in a chart like this, but no one will see that, such and such university was this and such university was that. Or you have the choice of not sharing any data at all, which then I guess thank you for taking the time to take the survey. But I think one benefit, if somebody's, even just with the contact information, if a student is thinking about transferring somewhere, needs to know, well, who do I get a hold of, ask them about recovery support on their campus, they could go here and, we've asked you in the survey, who should we contact about recovery support? And you've told us, so it's in here. Or, maybe you're at an organization or institution and you want to reach out to a sister school or another school that, is similar to yours. You can go here, you can get that information and people can start working together. I guess you can see here, even by who's responded so far, we have a huge number in, just are less than a year old or, just only a couple of years old of these collegiate recovery programs. So, we don't want just information from schools with the, well-established and long-running programs. I think you'll find that more people are in the boat of this is a very kind of young initiative and people are kind of just getting started. And so hopefully this can be a place where they can benchmark against, other schools and find a little bit of direction, because being such a young field, it's hard to know even where to begin. Here we have types of programs and services. So this is how respondents have answered that question so far. I'd like to show, I guess, just as an example of a filter, and we're going to build this out with more, but you have, how many people identify as in these collegiate recovery programs. You have prevention and intervention as two things. You might say, well, I'm an early stage, I want to know how other early stages are doing. You select just the early stagers and, instantly you get the feedback, you get the numbers for, what's everyone in early stage. Early and mid stage, you get a little more. So that's kind of what we're talking about, where, a lot of times if you just get a report at the end of the year, unless you have all of that data and you can, spend the time to go in and parse through it all, you might not get the answers that you want. But in this case, we're trying to make it as easy for you to kind of filter this information out. What else did I want to show? Yeah, I mean, this is really right here, just how people are responding. I mean, you should be able to go in here and with some of the questions, just get information of, this is how everybody's responded to this question. And, hopefully you can find that useful in some way or another to be able to see this. I think as the N goes up, as we get more responses, there's going to be a lot more that we can do and show, and then you can be more confident then that what you're seeing is, actually meaningful data. at the end here, just, you know, a way, place to tell you about kind of what our goals are, what we've been trying to do, and then some references, which we hope to have a lot more. But again, if you, you know, here's Transforming Youth Recovery. If you want the data from the 2017 census to do a comparison from the 2020 census, I'm sure it's going to end up being work that I do down the line. But, you know, the link is here. You can go and you can check it out. And that's kind of it as far as what we have now. I guess maybe I made some notes. I think Dylan's kind of covered it, but what we really want is for this to kind of assist organizations, institutions in their advocacy efforts to, you know, maybe you want to get some more funding for a program or whatever, I don't know. I guess one big, our commitment, I guess, is that to keep improving this thing, keep building it out as we get more responses. And I think the more responses we get, the more this is going to be useful to everybody. So that's kind of, I'll stop there. Maybe Dylan, do you want to wrap up and I can take some questions on it?
Yeah. So the two questions we got during that was, what is OPID, which is the Office of Post-Secondary Education Identification stuff, which is, yes, the survey that your university has to complete. I believe it's at least once a year to report a lot of the things like how many students do you have, how, like, and just in general at your university, what kinds of majors do you have, what is the graduation? It's like they go deep. There's so many questions. The OPID survey that universities answer that luckily someone at your university that you've probably never met was sitting at their desk for like weeks just compiling all this data. We get to just draw it. It's publicly available, so we get to draw it when you just put your university's name in there. And then
yeah, the OPID, it's a totally, I guess it's an unimportant identifying number. The only reason I brought it up is because when you're merging these huge data sets, it becomes really useful because people misspell their own university name or they put in an acronym or something, and then it doesn't match up. So when you have it on the ID number, it matches up very nicely.
Yeah, it keeps us organized and saves all of us a lot of time. And then, yeah, when we were going through the, can you go back to one of the bar charts that had the N on it? So yeah, on these charts, Teresa asked the question of the N's. They pretty much all have them. N is just the number of responses of that answer. And so I think overall we have, it's like 34 responses that are able to be shown.
Yeah, so we have, I think, yeah, 33 or 34 with a question like this, where it's a multi-select. You're supposed to select, you know, any and all. That's why these N's are, you know, they're not going to add up to 33 because you don't just make one choice. But yeah, I guess I can fix those charts and put in a number or something instead of just N, which is a little bit ambiguous.
And then, yeah, so right now we're at the mid-30s for amount of responses so far. When the 2017 census was fully published, full kind of response or full conclusions were made from it. There were 118, 117 universities in that data. And so yeah, we've had this survey open for a couple months and we're about a quarter of the way there, a little bit over a quarter. So yeah, if this is interesting to you and you think this could be really beneficial to the field, which obviously we believe that it is and will be, yeah, you're helping out on the front end. And so we appreciate you being here for sure. Any other questions about the actual dashboard itself before we keep going?
And I can bring it right back up if someone wants to see.
Yeah, okay.
See anything again.
Another question. So yeah, Jordan asked the question of why not a lot of CRPs have responded. Part of that is based on the state, like our audience is Safe Project right now. So a lot of these are people who are on our listserv. So when the TYR census was given a couple years ago, most of the responses were CRPs, ARHE members. Really, it was really only ARHE members and folks who were part of the TYR grantee program. So we got majority of the responses were CRPs. So we got to get there. And of course, like we would like to have more and more CRPs there. Those of you who are kind of in networks that are on listservs or have access to a lot of CRP folks, we would love your help, love your support in sharing this with them. Talk about that more at the end, but definitely all of you have access to different networks and different colleagues at different universities that would help us build this out more representatively. And yeah, we also don't know how many programs have been deeply impacted by COVID. We just don't have the latitude to either trust or also have time to respond to the survey at this moment. So we'd like to, again, all of you all there here, your assistance with that is going to mean the world to this survey and the impact that it has. So thanks for that question, Jordan. So, all right. The use cases, we can kind of talk a little bit about these here, Alex. The first one being just like benchmarking, which again, Alex, you were showing off is like, actually, can you talk a little bit more about like, will we have the ability to kind of specify by universities and clump them together? Or will we only be able to kind of differentiate by the OPE stuff?
Oh, no. So I think well, we'd like you to be able to benchmark on, whatever criteria you'd like. I mean, so, some of it is going to be, a really obvious one is the size of the school, whether it's a 4-year, whether it's a 2-year. But, like I showed earlier, for the Collegiate Recovery Program, are you early stage, mid stage, late stage? That might be an important criteria for you. Yeah, I'm trying to think of, obviously you'll be able to see, individual school responses. So, you might know coming in that, I'm in the same camp as Ohio State or University of Wisconsin or something like that. And so I'd like to see, how, what they're doing and compare that way. I think that's kind of how I've seen the benchmarking, where you can make the sample whatever you want, and then you'll have the aggregate data available to you right there, based on the sort of sample that you've chosen. Starting with, well, this is the sample of every single person who's responded so far.
Yeah, and also in Jordan's question, Jordan asked or like mentioned a little bit of how a lot of collegiate recovery staff, and I mean university staff in general, get requests for surveys all the time, like almost like an overwhelming amount of surveys, because especially if you're at a research institution, it's just like the body of the university is research, and students have surveys, and all of us want to kind of gather this information. Something that I think is important about this dashboard and about this survey is not that we're trying to gather so much data that people don't have to ask surveys, but it's more of this is open access data for you all. So if you wanted to do a survey about what exists in this state of Nevada, you could go into the survey, limit the data you have access to down to just that state, and maybe that could save time on a survey, or it could save time on a research project where it's just accessible to you, so you don't have to over survey people to get the same data often, or even kind of help us not have to ask certain questions during surveys to help them be shorter, things like that. And then of course, general awareness we talked about, and then some use case that I think is really interesting that I think I would have used this for all the time when I was on campus still, especially for folks who are doing kind of case management or direct student support, is often maybe we're at a university that's just building a collegiate recovery program. I know we at Safe Project had an intern who was helping start a collegiate recovery program, and then a little bit of the way through that decided like I need a program, or the university that already has one. And so they were able to find that student at a university that had a collegiate recovery program that they knew they would be safe to go to. So the dashboard, based on if you're willing to have your responses be publicly accessible through the survey, if you have a student coming to you saying, either I need to transfer, I have to move for whatever reason, I'm going to grad school, kind of whatever reason they would transfer universities or start a new educational endeavor, you could use these profiles that are on the dashboard to help a student see this is what this university has. Maybe you got into a school, what do they already have? What have they reported? If they've taken the dashboard, you can walk through that specific school with them and see, yeah, how can we make sure that this is a good spot for you, and who can you call, because there's going to be contact information and things like that to keep all of us connected for the sake of students. Yeah, we already talked about kind of the curiosity from all this is if you get, the more responses we have, the more diversity we're going to see in the field about what is possible in collegiate recovery and recovery support. So, final thoughts about the dashboard, Alex?
I think that about covers it.
Okay.
I think, again, you know, as we build this out, you know, we're constantly coming up with new ideas, Dylan and I, about, you know, well, how could people get some benefit out of this? So we appreciate any and all feedback on that. But, you know, hopefully some interesting tools, you know, whether it's, you know, Dylan was working on, you know, making a business case for collegiate recovery programs where you kind of input a little bit of information and, you know, about tuition or size of the school and that kind of stuff, and get some information back about, well, you know, how much money could, you know, a program like this save you, that kind of thing. We're very much trying to just anything that we can figure out that's gonna help you do your jobs and you know, kind of enrich this community is what we're after. So that's kind of it.
Exactly right. Yeah, the benefit, again, a little bit back to Jordan's question about why some of the responses are brand new kind of initiatives. Maybe that being the focus of a lot of our work over the past couple of years at the Safe Campuses team is helping folks get started. Yeah, like we would, even anybody at any stage of a collegiate recovery program, if there's something, for example, maybe April is looking to do like a business case, like you were saying, or looking just to do a general like advocacy document of some sort for the program you're looking to start. Our hope is that as this begins to evolve and as we get more responses, we can just build that into this, where, yeah, you click on that other tab, it says, give us this, or just type in these fields, and then we'll just kind of auto-populate a business case for you or an advocacy plan for you or things like that, that could save you time. Because again, that's in the campuses team, and obviously what Alex is up to is it's literally our full-time job to make all of this easier for you and more accessible, so you can do the work of advocating and working for your students without having to take days at a time to gather this data, to crunch this data, when we have technology to make that easier for all of us. And so that's really one of the dreams, is just make all of this work more accessible, because we know we have short staff, like issues with being understaffed and underpaid and under-resourced in general ways, that if we can make any of this easier for you at no cost, we're more than glad to. All right, that was one soapbox. We're gonna go on another one. So this is the part that's really important to me. And I understand that it can be difficult to see an effort like this as purely service. Like there's no way we're just doing this as service. And I promise you we actually are. This was an idea that came out of us a year ago when we said, we have this resource. It was transferred to Safe Project. What can we do to just make it accessible and make it better than it's ever been? And really help lift this work maybe to another level, or help it get out of the slump that COVID may have caused, or really whatever we can do. And so where that comes up is to make this survey and to make this dashboard work, all of us have to participate. And we have to, whatever communities you're in, whatever your brothers and sisters schools are, or the schools that you benchmark with, or the schools in your state, your ability, your willingness to share this with people that you think could benefit from it, or that people could benefit from their data, it's that if they respond, it then becomes all of our data to help inform this work. And so while each of us have specific institutions that I can reach out to Jordan for advice on a state school that has a collegiate recovery program and this many students, like we could always do that. But what if we could do that and have all the data to play around with and work together? Like if someone reaches out to Rob and says, Rob, help me build a collegiate recovery program. Well, it is my full-time job all day long to help schools do that. Rob could also say, ooh, have you filled out the census yet? Let me look up what you've filled out on the census, and we can kind of meet there so I can know more about what you're doing. And we can all work together to help this field grow and to help it be more accessible for more types of universities, for the different levels that universities are resourced, the different levels of staff we have. This is also accessible to students who request a link to the dashboard if they want to use it to start a program at their school, like I did, like a lot of us did in the chat here. You have to do this kind of from the ground up. And what if you walked into the door with this body of data that was yours, and you could do whatever you wanted with it, as long as we've all participated and contributed to it. So yeah, no data. There's rightly a lot of kind of concern in our culture, in our country, in our nation, or our country, in our world right now around why do you want my data? And our answer here is so that we can serve our students better, and so we can come together with this data, knowing that also, of course, there are other resources going on, other surveys that are happening, but we think that this is uniquely tied to the ones that have happened before as just what in the world is going on, and answer that question first so we can dream and look at effectiveness and things like that later. And then of course, like I said before, we're in the mid 30s in terms of responses. It only took 118 before for us to kind of write a long report and report all this out and publish it. But I do believe that there are many more schools in our country that support students in recovery. I believe they all do. Whether or not they do it on purpose, whether or not they do it intentionally or effectively is a whole different question, but let's figure out what exists first to set us all up for success. That's my rant. Thank you for listening to my TED Talk. Yeah. So we're going to go over, please, as you have more questions, Teresa, I want to answer your question here in a second. We're going to each answer some questions that we know are important just to answer aloud for all of us. The first one being, again, kind of what I talked about before, is how do we, as SAFE Project and SR4, benefit from this project? And I'll speak for SAFE Project first, and Alex, you can talk for SR4. Yes, this survey will make my job easier. And my job is to serve you all, and our job is to help you all serve each other. And so I don't really have any selfish interest in this. I don't get any kickback. There's no money involved when it comes to how we use this. So it will help me serve you all better, but it also helps you all serve each other and serve your campuses better. Even if you decide to bypass Alex and I entirely, it's still just open access data. So I don't know if you have anything else to add for SR4, Alex.
I don't think so. I mean, we're working for you. So it's your goals are our goals. I do know that Chris, our fearless leader, has really wanted to be a kind of pioneer in this space, and being among the leaders to try to get data into the recovery support community. I come from an analyst background, and my job has changed a lot this year because in this space, you've got to get information before you can start drawing any conclusions or any analysis on it. And it's been a big wake-up call of like, hey, the step one is go out there and get the info. So I think that's one way that I think we're all benefiting from it.
Yeah. I just want to respond to this one more time, just because it's a question we get a lot, because it's important that we answer it well, is how are you handling or protecting student data? The reality is, like I said at the beginning, is we're not asking student-specific questions. We're not asking for personally identifiable information. It's institutional public knowledge. We're just asking you to help us compile and help us, put it all together so we can use it across the country. So you're not going to be reporting things that you need student permission for, or even university kind of IRB permission for. We don't need, there's no IRB anything involved in this. It's just kind of, like I said, compiling publicly accessible information. And then so one of the questions we got from Teresa is, how can my school take this survey? Well, I'll repeat it again to finish, but you can either go to the link at the bottom left of the slide, safeproject.us/census, and that will give you access to the survey in a way that you have to do it in one sitting or without closing the webpage. We will, right after this, as anybody who registered for the Eventbrite, we will send you a personal link so that you have, it's basically like, it's your link where you can start the survey, complete it when you're done, rather than complete it when you're out of time. You can submit it that way. So you'll have your own personal just your own personal link to take the survey that you'll get after this. And so, yeah, you can email Alex, you can email me, I'll give you the Safe Campus email as well. You can email all of us at once if you want. We'll get you a link so that you don't have to worry about running out of time or having a student have a crisis. You need to go and take care of that now. What that makes a little bit tricky is referring colleagues to the census if they may not have the full 40 minutes at once to take the survey. But we'll talk about that here right before we close. So any other questions that we missed or people have? Okay. Feel free to keep putting them in as we talk. So one of the closing slides is, like we just said, you're going to receive a dedicated link to the survey right after this, at least by the end of the day, probably, or tomorrow, for the survey itself. Then anybody who has taken the survey will get a link to the dashboard next week. So you can look out for that. And of course, you'll see the dashboard grow and live as you're using it and as we update it and as we continue to make sure it fully works for all of you and all the needs you're going to have. So yeah, with that in mind, if you are interested in helping us, like, quote unquote, market this or help us reach more people, please email the campus's email on the slide right now. I would love to set up a call with you to figure out, oh, how do I put this in my newsletter? How do I put this in anywhere, like on social media, share it with other universities. The reality is that any schools you want to compare with or any schools you want to benchmark with, if they haven't taken the survey, we can't help you with that. So we need your help to get them, the folks you want to work with, to take the survey. And again, so that we can all benefit from it, whether or not we're an existing CRP or a single human being hoping to start something on our campus. So, final thought, Alex?
No, thank you for being here.
Yeah, y'all are great. I appreciate you spending the time. Please email us to get a link if you don't get one today or tomorrow. And then we would love any assistance you can give with helping us build up the data set with you in terms of getting other folks to take the survey. So that's all we got, folks. Thanks again. Sounds good, Teresa. I hope we do.